the dude about.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, it's been interesting to me having been a writer about psychedelics. Like, I found that musicians have definitely gravitated to my work, from like electronic music DJs to like the band MGMT to like Sting or whatever. So I do think there is like musicians, like other artists, maybe more than some other areas of artists, seem very willing to open their minds, using, pursuing these types of visionary experiences for new insights or new sounds.
New sounds. Music, in a way, is the most present tense art form, in the sense that if you play an instrument, the moment you play it, you're hearing it. If you're a writer, filmmaker, there's a huge amount of planning that goes into creating the story that you're telling, and obviously that's true with writing music and producing an album or all that. But
painting is pretty immediate too, though. No?
It's true. Painting is immediate, except that a painter normally, and there are experimental painters, but a painter is working towards a final version of the painting when they say it's done. But a musician, if they're on stage, it's not like they're racing to get to the end and say, "Aha, I finished it." They're every moment on that path is the music. Whereas a painter, the only moment that the painting is right is when they say, "Okay, no more strokes." Psychedelics, I think, have a ability to throw people very viscerally into the present, particularly when there are people who have difficulty doing so. They haven't done meditation, and so musicians naturally inclined to seek presence.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting to think about what the sounds that we associate with the types of, musical approaches that seem somehow more like psychedelic. It's like overdubs or overtones or power chords or whatever.
Right, but I mean, Alan Watts talks about, during when LSD was first kind of blowing through America in the late 60s, that, Life magazine would do a spread about LSD, and everything would be, higgledy-piggledy with prism images of naked girls dancing, and everything's out of focus. But actually the experience of LSD, if, his point was, if you want to see it, you should have a crystal clear image of, the mosaic on the top of a gorgeous church. And that is what LSD feels like, is seeing the beautiful truth of reality in hyper clarity.
Right, but it's such an intensifier, and it sort of resculpts our perception of like time and so on, that maybe like certain very intense types of music or dissonant structures, I don't know, there are different things that seem to maybe create like a metaphor in the brain that connects to the psychedelic experience somehow. Right. Well, it's quite interesting as people think of psychedelics as a drug, like any other drug, but actually they're strangely enough, they're compounds that actually can cure addictive patterns or have really positive impacts on them. So in the 50s, they did studies with LSD and alcoholism. They were giving like mega doses of LSD to alcoholics, and they were finding that even one big trip would totally change somebody's path. And Bill Wilson, who was the founder of 12-Step or whatever, he wanted to incorporate LSD into that, but got pushback, I guess.
Where do you think the pushback came from?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the negative idea around these substances, grew really strong. But now they're doing studies of like, one substance that I explored is an African psychedelic called iboga, and there's a lot of, kind of evidence that is a great tool for different types of addiction, like heroin addiction. There are clinics to use ayahuasca for heroin, or there's also other studies about using different psychedelics to treat post-traumatic stress disorder and so on.
Do you see iboga as the male, where ayahuasca is the female psychedelic? Does that hold any weight with you as an idea?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I've definitely had, even the last time I did ayahuasca, I had sort of direct communication with this like female spirit who was kind of like dancing around, and it felt like that was the spirit of this medicine. Mm-hmm. So yeah, strangely enough, and I felt this the opposite way around the iboga, that it does feel like this male, fatherly, patriarchal kind of force.
Yeah. but in a positive patriarch.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that Russell is one of the most intelligent people that I've ever met, and I feel lucky in a way that he reached out to me after he saw this documentary that I made, 2012 Time for Change, and then we hung out, we became friends. I think he actually, he's admitted that, that he found a lot of ideas in my work that were very useful for him as he reformulated his kind of vision of who he was and what he thinks about. So he could, the sort of mixture of politics and spirituality and some ecology and a radical kind of sort of socialist anarchist politics at that are things that I think my work helped him to access. And from my perspective, it's been interesting because he's taken ideas that I had and been a huge megaphone, to get them to a much bigger audience.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you feel that megaphone changes the tonality of the message?
I mean, it's not just me. Obviously, he's very, like me. He's a Gemini. I mean, he has a lot of different influences and so on. I think it's amazing. Like, it changes it in certain respects, but there are definitely core similarities.
Right. Right.